Hi, government students. I had a video that I had made before the class started about the bureaucracy of the United States. And when I was going to post it for this week, I thought to myself, I should wait because there was a Supreme Court case challenging how much power and authority bureaucratic institutions in the United States have. And the Supreme Court said they were going to release a whole bunch of decisions on Thursday and Friday of this week. And I thought, well, maybe I'll wait and see if they make a decision on that case before I post the video. And sure enough, this morning at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time, so approximately 30 minutes ago, I'm making this video at 10:50 in the morning, the Supreme Court issued a decision which strips a lot of power from bureaucratic agencies in the United States. So there's a lot of uncertainty now of what that means for bureaucratic agencies in the United States. And so I guess I'll sort of go through the traditional way the bureaucracy works, and then we'll sort of talk about what this Supreme Court case issued today on June 28th at 10:20 a.m., what that decision really means for bureaucracies in the United States. So I feel like bureaucracies and bureaucrats have a bad rap, right? So when we think of like bureaucracy, we think of like the DMV, and we think of inefficient, bloated systems where you wait in line for hours upon end and no one is able to help you. And that's partly true. But in just the most simple of terms, bureaucracies are staffed by bureaucrats. Bureaucrats are officials with the power to implement and enforce laws and policies. And bureaucracies are organizations that implement and enforce laws and policies. So, like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, the FBI, police, right? Police officers are technically bureaucrats. They implement and enforce laws and policies. Public school teachers who teach curriculum designed by state and local and national government are technically bureaucrats. So bureaucrats can be at multiple different levels. You can also have bureaucracies and bureaucrats within private sector, although mostly we think of civil service when we think of bureaucracies and bureaucrats. And basically, going back to the beginning of the country, we've had a very large bureaucracy with a lot of bureaucrats, a lot of people to create and enforce laws and policies because of our system of federalism, right? So because of our system of federalism, we have bureaucracies that exist at the local, the state, and the national level. So we have three levels of bureaucracy, all of which are staffed by bureaucrats. And so the government employs quite a lot of people to implement and enforce and oversee laws and policies throughout the United States at various levels. And today, for the past 100 plus years, 130 plus years, the bureaucracies of the United States are staffed mostly by professional civil servants. We have a merit-based civil service system where you earn your position based upon merit and qualification and expertise. In the past, we had what was known as the spoils system, where presidents and governors and mayors and city council members, they would use a patronage system where, if they won an election, they would then give out important government jobs to their supporters. And that was not really a good way to run a government because most people don't have expertise in the things we need them to have expertise at, especially today in our highly advanced, complex technical world. I am an educator. I teach you all, in addition to other places that I teach, because I have some sort of expertise, right? I've gone to graduate school and done all those things. I would not be good at NASA. I don't know. People go work at NASA, right? One of our bureaucracies staffed by bureaucrats, or people that know like rocket science, to get us to the moon and stuff like that. I can't do that. So if you want to work at NASA, you have to be qualified to work at NASA. We just don't give anyone jobs at NASA. Or if you want to be a police officer, you ideally go through some sort of training. If you want to work for the Environmental Protection Agency, you have some sort of training and expertise in environmental regulation and environmental policies and environmental science and what constitutes clean air and clean water. If you want to work for the Food and Drug Administration or the Institutes of Health, the Treasury, the Department of Commerce, you have to have some expertise to work there. Otherwise, you won't know what you're doing. And the reason why you have to have expertise is because traditionally, bureaucracies implement and enforce laws and policies. So the way traditionally our system has worked for the past 100+ years is that Congress passes a generalized law granting an executive agency, a bureaucracy, power to create and enforce policy. So, for example, environmental regulations, right? We have all sorts of laws regarding clean air and clean water. And what that means, Congress is not the place to determine what the standards for clean air and clean water are, because members of Congress don't know what constitutes clean air and clean water, because that's not their expertise. Right? So most people in Congress are not environmental science experts who understand the nuances of how many parts per million are okay for something to be in the air to breathe, to be acceptable. That's why we have scientists at the Environmental Protection Agency to take the generalized laws that Congress creates, granting the Environmental Protection Agency power to create like auto emission standards, or the power to determine how much particulates per thousand or per million are acceptable in drinking water of certain different chemicals, or how much fluoride needs to be in the water, or how much pollution in the air is acceptable to breathe. They grant the EPA authority to create these rules and regulations. The bureaucracy, the bureaucrats, the EPA craft rules and regulations, and then they enforce those rules and regulations. Right? This is what's referred to as bureaucratic autonomy. Right? That bureaucracies, bureaucratic agencies, and individual bureaucrats on the ground level have the ability to implement and enforce policy as need be. Now, this has worked effectively for the past, since the 1880s, basically. Because if you think about it, if we just go back to COVID, for example, and COVID vaccinations, who should get them? What priority should be given? What's the dose? How often you should receive that dose? All those things are highly technicalized things that people in the medical profession know and understand, that doctors and scientists and molecular biologists and people who understand anatomy and genetics, they all understand that stuff. I don't understand that stuff, right? But when my doctor says go get a flu shot, I go do it, right? When we think about, the COVID vaccination, right, the bureaucratic agencies are responsible for evaluating the safety, the effectiveness, determination of what should be in the shot, the upcoming boosters, or what the boosters should look like, who should get them, what the recommendations are, and then how to distribute them. Right? All these things are not legislated by Congress. Congress didn't legislate how to distribute vaccinations. Congress didn't set the standards for who should get vaccinated. Congress didn't set the dosage, right? That's all done by medical professionals, by the bureaucratic agencies. Because Congress just can't do that. One, it's highly technical and it's beyond their capacity to understand. But two, to expect Congress to legislate every specific nuance of every specific highly technicalized policy just isn't practical, right? We can't have Congress legislate parts per million for clean air, clean water. Can't have Congress legislate every minutia of auto safety regulation, right? We can't have Congress regulating all the different things that go into AI security and stuff like that, or stock trading and all the regulations. That's done by the bureaucratic agencies that are given power by Congress, because Congress recognizes they can't do that. Now, today, the Supreme Court basically said that that power is called into question. Okay, that this bureaucratic autonomy, this bureaucratic discretion, this bureaucratic rulemaking can come under judicial review, and the courts have the right to review these policies that are implemented by the government, because they're not laws passed by Congress, and technically only Congress can pass laws. And since these bureaucratic agencies are essentially creating laws, that's kind of sketch. What does that leave our bureaucratic agencies today? Well, essentially this grants a lot of power and authority to courts to review executive department decision making, executive department guidelines. These bureaucratic agencies are within the purview of the executive branch. The executive branch executes the law and enforces the law. Hence, bureaucratic agencies fall under the executive branch. So this is a transfer of power by the Supreme Court from the executive branch to the judicial branch, granting the judicial branch the authority to review and potentially invalidate regulations. Everything from environmental standards to the Securities and Exchange, business transaction rules and stuff like that. All those are now eligible for review, and the courts have said they will not defer to government agencies anymore to create these rules and policies and determine whether or not these rules and policies are necessary. So what that means for the future is shrug. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I will say that courts have the same problem that Congress does, that the judges and justices don't have the expertise necessary to determine what is and isn't necessary. And so the Supreme Court case, while not a shock to most people who are observers of the court, this is consistent with this Supreme Court and dismantling executive branch power. It does create some real worry that a number of regulations and rules that are in place that have been created by government agencies may soon be on the chopping block, which would then require, if we wanted those regulations to be back in place, Congress to legislate. And as we all know, Congress doesn't really do much legislating these days, especially not during election times. So a little bit of wait and see, a lot of nerves amongst many people, especially people who work in bureaucracy, about what this means for them and their powers and abilities. But we will wait and see.